August Q&A. I do this every month where you can literally ask me anything. My name is Chef AJ, and this month I am being joined by my friend and partner, John Pierre. John Pierre has worked with me for years in the Ultimate Weight Loss Program, and each of us do a live Q&A there, but sometimes we do it together because it's more fun and you get to have two for the price of one. We take the questions from the members of the Ultimate Weight Loss group, and once we get through those, we are happy to answer any and all questions that you guys post live. Welcome, John Pierre.
Thank you. Great to be here, and thanks for all the amazing work you've been doing.
Well, thank you. You're welcome to come back on the show anytime you want. And I know, what have you been up to? You're not in Colorado anymore, right? You're in.
I'm kind of still, no, I've been in Colorado and then LA a little bit, but most everything I'm doing is pretty much via Zoom. So I have 2 Zoom programs I'm doing, and I still do private consults. So
well, that's great, and we are sure going to be posting them in the chat notes, but also in the show notes, which will be chat only stays here while you're watching. And by the way, a lot of people have asked, well, I can't see the chat afterwards. Yes, you can. If you go to YouTube, you just have to click a button that says live chat, and the chat will reappear if you like that. Hello, Nadej, welcome back. Okay, so why don't we get to the first question? And some of them are more towards exercise. I don't know the answer, but like, for example, this one from Julie. This will be more for you, I think. And it says, it is very hot here, and when I go on these long rides, I sweat buckets. I use the Fortisol spray that is on John Pierre's website on those days on my food after the ride to replace some of the salt. Is the Fortisol compliant? I feel I need to replace some salt because I'm sweating so much, but do I? I don't like it, and I have trouble digesting. I don't like, and I have trouble digesting celery. So I'll let you take that one because I have to do a few technical things to share this broadcast.
So that's a great question. So you don't need to use any supplementation at all, generally. Just use like chard, tomatoes, and if you can't do celery, which is a great source, can you do celery juice? And that's a really great thing to do. You actually just take celery and you juice quite a few stalks. I mean, whole heads actually, 4 or 5 of them, and then you put those. You put that liquid in ice cube trays, and then you freeze them. And then you take a couple ice cubes and plop it in your water bottle. And that gives you the natural sodium and minerals that will help replenish electrolytes. But just keeping your diet high in fresh fruits and vegetables will get that potassium and magnesium. And then, like I said, chard, a little bit of chard for other people who can handle celery, that'd be great, or tomatoes. That's a good way to do it. The Fortisol is not really a salt per se. It's a mineral spray. So it's not just sodium you're getting other minerals, and it just makes food tasty. The only challenge with that is if you're in our program, Ultimate Weight Loss, or you're doing any of those, sometimes that seasoning can, since it's a little salty tasting, it can set you off. So you do need to be careful with that. Now, I also have worked with some people where their sodium is so low, and they, for some reason or other, they don't want to eat celery or chard. So I literally will have them take a little piece of sweet potato about the size of $0.50, flatten it out, and put a little bit of sodium in there, fold it up, and then they swallow it like a pill. And the reason they do that is because I don't want them to taste the sodium like sprinkling it on their food, because it would set them off. But that's more of a last resort. I would stick more with the celery juice, celery, or chard and tomatoes.
And that's a great idea. And celery juice has gotten really popular for all kinds of reasons. And people have even said it's selling out of celery, but you've been talking about this forever, even before it became, quote, medicinal. But one of the things from a culinary standpoint, you're absolutely right. You can replace, when you're cooking in the broth, you can use celery juice as some of the broth or water. It is really incredibly salty.
Yeah. And I do that a lot. That's very effective for athletes too, because the problem with juicing celery every day is most people don't want to do the cleanup. So if you juice it and then you freeze it, well, then it's done for you already.
Right. And I can imagine if you freeze ice cubes, and you can get these great, easy to release silicone ice cube trays, like from Tupperware or other places, you could probably on your, whatever you're doing athletically, put some of those celery cubes as the ice cubes in your beverage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
That's a great idea. Somebody smart watching will probably start selling frozen celery juice cubes because people, energy conservation principle, people wanting to use that. Somebody watching live is saying, I'm starting to use my Vitamix to make celery juice after my physical exercise. If I don't say your name, it's because I don't see it. It has you as a Facebook user. And hello, Teresa and Lori. Thanks for being here. So Julie has another question.
One more quick thing. So you don't have to juice it if you don't want. You can use your blender. as long as, I think she said she couldn't handle celery. Is that what it was?
Well, she says, I don't like and have trouble digesting celery. So if she has trouble digesting it, my guess it's all, if she juiced it, I don't know if she'd have trouble digesting it. But if you blend it in the Vitamix, it's still got all that fiber.
Yeah, sometimes it's just too stringy. And if they have IBS or some intestinal thing, it's better to juice it.
Absolutely. Yeah, because we've got some IBS questions coming up. And Julie has another question about her 40 to 50-mile bike rides that she does early in the morning. She says, I usually eat 1 to 2 bananas before I go out and eat dates on the ride. When I get back, I have 2 pounds of vegetables plus starch. I have 10 to 15 pounds to lose, but I'm not sure what else to bring as it has to fit in my cycling jersey and be lightweight. I burn 800 to 1,000 calories on the rides.
Well, I think one of the best bangs for your buck, caloric wise and mineral wise, would be dates. Dates are always going to be good. And what you can do is, if you don't want to carry the dates and just eat them that way, you can make them into a paste. And a lot of people, what they do is they'll get a squeeze tube, a reusable squeeze tube, and they just fill that. And then what you do is chill it. You can either freeze it for a little bit where it won't completely freeze, and then you can squeeze that in every so often. But generally, dates would work good. If you want to eat fruit, whole fruit is good. Dr. Ruth Heydrich, who is probably one of the greatest ultra endurance runners in our movement, and she's in her 80s now. She used to just be happily on her triathlons eating potatoes.
Mm-hmm. And Robert Cheek was on my show yesterday, and he was talking about, because people had a lot of questions about pre and post workout, and he said he just gets these like little packs of like applesauce and sweet, like it's almost like baby food, but it's like just pureed sweet potatoes, and he said he uses those.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is you can make them. They do have reusable tubes you can use. So you can actually put sweet potatoes in there. You can put dates, or you can put a combination of dates and sweet potatoes and then squeeze them into, and then you just clean out the tube and reuse it.
Right. Well, because she's saying she says she still has 10 to 15 pounds to lose. And so dates are very healthy, but they're 1,300 calories a pound. Sweet potatoes are about 365 calories a pound. Could somebody fuel themselves with sweet potatoes on long rides?
Well, the truth of the matter is all of us, you included, have enough body fat to fuel yourself for hundreds and hundreds of miles. So if somebody's trying to lose weight, which I don't really talk about weight loss because that's something that will naturally happen. But if you're trying to lose weight, just taking a little bit of fruit to get minerals and don't get the calories, and let your body fat be the source of fuel for you.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. And, maybe that would be something to try, because I've never done I've done a 40-mile bike ride before, but I just can't eat and exercise. It's just not something that agrees with me. If I'm exercising, I don't want food in me. Like, I've never done ultra marathons, but when I'm exercising, the last thing I think of is eating.
Yeah. You'd probably be pretty good though, because you get on your bike. I remember when you would get on your bike and do really long bike runs or inside the house, watching
right.
show.
I think I was doing 90 minutes because I wasn't doing it every day, because I was still resisting the idea that really I have to exercise every day. But now that I spin every day, with very rare exception, I just do an hour a day, and I do it standing, and I'm watching a show. So it's like, I feel like I'm cheating because I'm not really present with the exercise, but hey, I'm watching the show. So, and you're the one that taught me the importance of exercise. So thank you. I was late to the party. I've been interviewing interesting people like Dr. Stephanie Peacock from True North. She was a champion swimmer. She started swimming when she was 9 years old, and it's like, I didn't do anything till I was 52. So I feel like sometimes with people, the love of exercise, or maybe the modeling of exercise from their family, I think it's almost like a genetic thing, because it seems like some people just naturally love it and other people resist it.
Well, and also remember with you, look at where you lost your weight. You lost it in the kitchen. And so we don't encourage people to exercise just as a form of weight loss. It's more to build your self-esteem, build your bones, make you healthier and happier. But I wouldn't go through 6-7 hours a day of exercise to lose weight. I would just start cutting back on some of the oils and large amounts of fats that people are eating.
Right. Rachel says, when I ride 40 to 50, I stay fasted. I think it helps my fat burning to stay fasted. I do need food by 80 miles, though, which is rare for me to do. Wow, so let's see. Yeah, and she says she blends limes and puts them in ice cube trays. That sounds actually really good. Yes, Shariana, you can totally ask questions here, guys. We're just going to get to the ones that were submitted in advance first, as always do. Haunted Mansion says, I lived on potatoes during my mountain bike races and triathletes. So very nice. Marina says, I'm shedding pounds steadily for the last 5 months, between 15 and 18 pounds. It varies. That's fantastic. And so the other part, this wasn't her question, JP, but what I want to point out, and you can weigh in, pun intended on this, how do you know, Julie or other people, that you have 10 to 15 pounds to lose? And this is something that Dr. Lyle talks about a lot, that there is no ideal weight for anybody. There's a range of ideal weights for people. And, you know, when you look at BMI, for example, you can be at 18.5 and you can be at 24.9 and still be considered at your ideal weight. And so how does somebody even know that they have 10 or 15 pounds to lose? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's all most people, I'm not saying these folks who are asking the question, but most people, it's all vanity and societal induced. You know, you see all these supermodels running around that are completely, you know, I mean, at a body fat level that's very unhealthy for you. And many of them attain that slenderness and thinness in an unhealthy way. And we're trying to always replicate that. If you look at Aboriginal people that live outside, they work all day, they eat basically foods from the ground, they don't have this tiny stick waist and these thick arms. You know, they're built strong and they have some body fat. You're supposed to have some body fat, and you're not supposed to be completely void of body fat.
Right, exactly. So I'm going to skip to a question that's being asked live because it goes so fast. I don't want to lose it. And it is from Beth, and we love her and know her. So let's see. She did it in 2 parts, so this is going to be hard to find part 1. But it looks like, okay, her mother has ovarian cancer and is going through chemotherapy. Siblings and I are in different states and cannot visit due to COVID. Okay, part 2 below. Siblings want to provide our mom with foods that contain animals, processed foods, junk. I eat chicken soup with chocolate chip cookies. I have a problem with this. I don't want to hurt her. This sounds like a session with Dr. Lyle, because when you've got more than one personality involved, it's not something. I'm going to let JP hear what he says. And then part 3. Any help navigating food issues with siblings who don't get it? Foods can be supportive of health or harmful. You know, if the thing is, if your mother doesn't get it and your siblings don't get it, I don't know what you can do to convince them, but I'll let JP weigh in.
Yeah, and one of the things you can do is just ask them if they'd be willing to watch this documentary or read this book, and share some of the different websites like Dr. Greger's site, Nutrition Facts, or Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, their site. And then if it's possible, if the physicians will allow it, or whoever's in charge, if they allow you to bring in smoothies or green juices, that's a way to get a concentrated volume of vegetables and fruit into each mouthful. That's the most effective way. But ultimately, you know, the person who's eating has to be willing to make that change. And then of course it's like a battle with family. I've seen that all the time, where families will battle it out and literally get in fights over the diet of their loved one. It's amazing. So
yeah,
there's not always an answer.
I don't know what she can do because like you say, if either party was open to it, like, so if her siblings were open and her mom wasn't, or if her mom was open and her siblings weren't, she'd at least have one ally, but it's her against the whole family. So I don't, you know, and even if she was a doctor, you know how addictive this stuff is, and people don't believe how important it is for health, or that's why people get the diseases in the first place. So I empathize with her situation, and I feel bad, and I'm sorry her mom has that. But what are you going to do, you know, when somebody is older and their palate is set, and you have everybody else in the family trying to feed them crap? It's hard. Yeah, very hard. We hear this all the time, and we're so sorry. So Sharanya says, what are JP's thoughts on snacks for a 16-year-old teen who started cardio and exercise regularly to lose weight and also be fit?
Well, again, I would do everything you can to encourage any fruits and vegetables in their diet, whatever they like. Putting out a fruit bowl is really important. Having like fruit salad in the refrigerator is important. Having cut up vegetables that they like, whether it's red pepper, mushroom, celery, and then making sure you have a variety of dip, like a hummus, a guacamole, a salsa, anything that you can do to encourage them to eat healthier. And of course, foods that are a little bit lower in fat. But you don't want to start kids with having this eating disorder mentality. Just like with my clients, I don't ever talk about weight loss, because I'm just trying to get them healthy. And I also don't talk about blood pressure and heart disease, because all those things will go down. Blood pressure is going to go down. Your weight's going to go down. Arteries are going to open up. Your moods are going to improve just as you live a healthier lifestyle. So you don't want to fight with the kids, but just provide lots of healthy snacks and do your very best to limit the junk that they're exposed to, especially now with COVID, when kids are home all the time and you're doing the shopping, you're kind of in control.
Right. Because they're not going to school, and they're not going to after school, and they're not going to other people's house. So only have healthy food in the house. It doesn't have to be just fruits and vegetables, but, you know, make a lot of batch cooking rice and beans and sweet potatoes, things like that, I think would be great for kid, and let the kid get involved in the cooking process too. I think when, even though he's 16, he's not a kid. A lot of times when people make things, they feel proud and they want to eat them, you know, teach them how to use the Instant Pot. That's every bit as useful. Somebody else watching named Gone with the Kale, great name, saying they use Japanese sweet potatoes for biking. I could see that. Those are easy to hold in your hand. Okay, so let's get to, but I also recommend that Julie watch the YouTube that I did with Dr. Lyle on ideal weight, where he explains that there's going to be a range, could be 30 to 40 pound different range for a given height for everybody based on genetics, based on, you know, there's curvy people, there's people, you know, people have different body types. And so that's something to keep in mind. Okay.
Well, and also AJ, when I work with clients, I let them know right off the bat, I guarantee you're going to gain weight with me. So if they come to me anorexic or they come thin, like you are thin and healthy, I guarantee that you and I are going to work out, you're going to gain muscle, so you're going to gain weight, which is a healthy thing. So if I'm working with an anorexic person, we want them to gain fat and muscle. But if I'm working with somebody healthy and thin like you, you're going to gain weight. There's no way around it. I want you to gain weight because it's going to hopefully be all muscle and bone density.
Thank you. So we have a question from Angela. What specific exercises other than walking and weightlifting are good for pre-osteoporosis?
Okay, so somebody has maybe osteopenia, the beginning stages, which so many millions of Americans do, because how will they know they have it? You know, they're not really getting tested, most people, unless they're getting a DEXA bone scan and things like that. But I actually have some videos on that. So I have videos on balance and fall prevention and bone density. And I think I sent you the links for that, so you could post that, but that's on healthyhumanrevolution.com. And basically what you want to do is anything, like people will kind of debate me all the time and they'll say, well, you said that swimming or yoga isn't the best bone building. Well, you know what? Everything's about different degrees. If you just hold your hand in the air, by you holding your arm up, in theory, you're stimulating your muscles and everything. And if you go like this is better opening and closing than this. But all of a sudden hitting a cardio kickboxing, hitting a bag, or lifting weights is better than that. So there's different degrees of things. Yoga is going to build some bone density, but it's not going to build the bone density compared to somebody doing cardio kickboxing where they're punching, kicking, and kneeing a bag. And swimming is going to build some bone density, but it's not going to build the same bone density as somebody running an obstacle course or doing a marathon training. So anything that you can do to stimulate muscle, so whether you're pulling on something or pushing something, you're lifting a weight or a band, or you're boxing, all those things are going to be building bone, and we want that. And then in terms of balance and fall prevention and things like that, we want to be practicing balance exercises like just standing on one foot for 15 seconds. That's a biomarker of aging. We can tell how fast somebody's aging on how well they can stand on one foot. Can they do it for 15 seconds without wobbling? So I have a whole 2 different videos on bone building and then also on balance. And
guys, all the links to everything JP is talking about is going to be in the show notes. So if you can't see it now because you're watching live and looking at the chat, as soon as the broadcast is over, you just go to YouTube. There's an upside down triangle. You click it, and that's what's called the show notes. So thanks, JP. And also eating greens is super important, right? I mean, it's important in general, but especially I think about the book by Amy Joy Lanoux, Building Bone Vitality. And it seems like greens are the nutritional powerhouses when it comes to calcium.
Well, you're making a great point. So from a dietary standpoint, there's a couple problems that we have. Is one, as a society, we don't eat enough volume of vegetables. And most of our vegetables are just on the standard American diet. It's just a piece of lettuce or on your hamburger. So we're not eating enough volume. So we need to do what you've been teaching for a long time, is a couple pounds of vegetables a day, preferably dark green. And it's not just the calcium, it's the magnesium, it's the boron, it's the vitamin C that helps form, just like zinc. And the other thing that people don't talk enough about in our movement, and unfortunately, this is a big problem as people get older, is you still need to make sure you get enough protein, because protein is very integral for bone health. And some people think when they're getting older, they have a little scoop of beans and they're okay. Well, as you get older, you don't break apart or digest some proteins very well. So you want to make sure you're getting a good supply of legumes, beans, peas, and lentils throughout the day, making sure you're getting some spinach, which is a great source of protein, and broccoli. And if you're able to handle nuts and seeds, that would be excellent too.
Thank you. Elisa, who's watching live, asked, We camp a great deal. My nutrition is so good at home. Then camping is so hard to keep the food on point. So then the cravings all come back and I go backwards. 4 kids, 1 husband who want vegan on camp food. You know, I had a client who was, you know, food sober, abstinent for quite a long time, and went camping or went to, you know, something like a barbecue, and one s'more just. So I'll let you take that first, JP, while I look for some more questions. And I did find some resources online, because I know you asked this question on the earlier broadcast, Elisa, but I couldn't get to you because we had the other doctor talking. But Forks Over Knives did a wonderful piece, if you go to their website, on healthy vegan camping, and there's quite a few blogs that address this, but I'll let JP address this, because also from a food addiction standpoint, it's really hard because your environment is wherever you are. And if you keep a clean environment at home, it's very hard to not to go off track when there's s'mores and, you know, hot dog, not that there's, you know, meat hot dogs, but when there's things that you aren't used to that are of a higher caloric density, it takes an inordinate amount of willpower, self-control to not eat those things, I think.
Well, and you can remember, AJ, when you had to travel a lot, you know, we both used to travel a lot. And I was always telling you, you need to tighten the screws when you go out of town. Don't slack when you go out of town. It's vacation time. So when you go out of town, you can't lower your standards. So that's why I would have you bring green powders and things like that, because sometimes you'd be going on these vacations and they weren't supplying you enough greens. So one thing you can do if you're camping, which works great, is just if you can get a dehydrator, and you can dehydrate vegetables, and you can dehydrate hummus. And once it's dehydrated, all you have to do is take the hummus, it'll be dry, put it in a glass container, and then you just add hot water or cold water. Hot water works faster, and it rehydrates in minutes. And there you've got fresh hummus. And then if I do that with vegetables, then I do the same thing. I just soak those vegetables in hot water, in about 15 or 20 minutes, they look like vegetables that were steamed. So you can still have at least vegetables. You can do the same thing with fries, potatoes. You can still do the same thing with that. So there's a lot of options, and there are different companies that make vegan foods that are dehydrated for full meals. You just add hot water to, and those work really good too. And I have some links too. In the first Zoom series, we did a whole course on that for the pandemic, on how to store and prepare foods for emergencies. So I'm sure that link will be up, but that's one of the Zoom series I did.
I think that what I'm reading into it is part of it is that FOMO, where people have fear of missing out, that because everybody else in her party wants these foods and is eating these foods. And it's sort of hard. It's sort of like if you're an alcoholic and you go camping and everybody else is drinking alcohol, it's pretty hard to resist the alcohol.
Well, and that's why, like Dr. Goldhammer said before, that it's easier to reverse a disease like heart disease or diabetes than it is to lose weight and keep it off. Losing weight and keeping it off is very, very difficult in our society because it's a legal drug that you're eating. You're not really eating food, you're eating processed food. Nobody's going out at midnight for broccoli slaw. So they're going out for foods that are processed. And every day you're getting bombarded from the minute you wake up to the minute you go to bed with ads and jingles on the radio and things like that. So it's very difficult to stay with laser beam focused and on the straight and narrow course. So that's where you need to have accountability partner. You have to have coaching. You have to be part of a program. And that's why we created the Ultimate Weight Loss, so people would have a community to go to and can keep them on the straight and narrow. And that's why I do private coaching, is to be there for somebody to direct them.
And what I would say is if she's unable to partake without going down that rabbit hole where she can't get back on, her family can have these things, but when they're sitting around the campfire eating it, it's time for her to take a walk.
Yeah. Yeah. As long as it's safe, definitely.
Yeah. And she shouldn't be the one that's buying them and preparing them. I mean, it just really depends how serious you are about this. And, you know, it's hard, guys. And that's why we need a community. And when people eat differently, it can really drag us down or it can build us up. But it's, you know, the thing I would argue is these foods are not good for them either. And just you know, people say, oh, well, but my husband and my kids, they're thin. So what? A lot of people are thin. Thin people have strokes and heart attacks and cancer all the time. Read Dr. Furman's book, Fast Food Genocide, and especially if they're younger children, read Disease Proof Your Child. Just because somebody's thin doesn't mean they should be eating this crap, you know? And you know, especially if it's a trigger for you. So I empathize with your situation. That's why your environment is so important. And unfortunately, if you got people in your environment that are eating differently, it is going to be hard. We have a comment from Radhika who says, as a physical therapist, yoga is excellent to stimulate bone density. Yeah, yoga is just excellent in general.
No, it's interesting because I get a lot of comments when I talk about yoga. People always mention yoga. And if you listen to me carefully, you'll understand that this builds bone density, but so does this. This builds more bone density, and this builds more bone density. So it's a hierarchy. Though yoga builds bone density, it doesn't build bone density the same way that running a marathon or hitting a heavy bag and kicking a heavy bag does. So you have to go at whatever level you're able to, but you need to keep going up the ladder to keep intensifying things. Because if you walk every day for 5 minutes, after a week or so, your body and your bones and your muscles adapt, and no longer does 5 minutes stimulate bones like it did at first, and it doesn't stimulate muscle the same way. So now we have to either up the intensity or the duration of it. So I've never said that yoga is not a good thing. I think it's a good thing, but I don't think people that have osteoporosis can go into yin yoga and lay on their back and say they're building bone density. I don't think it's fair. So I think we just have to understand there's different degrees and hierarchy of it. But I've been teaching and practicing yoga for over 30 years. And just a quick note about yoga, when I taught in India, what we do here as yoga is just asanas or poses. We don't teach yoga, most people, because there's a whole system of yoga that goes beyond just the poses, that goes into a philosophy, the 8 limbs of yoga, and ahimsa, and compassion, and satya, truthfulness, and all these different things. So I think yoga is one of the greatest things in the world. It's been the core of what I've taught for over 30 years. So I'm a big proponent of yoga.
Great. Stephanie says, would you find wearing a weight-bearing vest around the house for a period of time daily while doing chores to be beneficial for bone density and strength?
It is, but you have to just, again, make sure that the weight vest is interchangeable, where you can add weight slowly, because you don't want to just put on this big 30-pound weight vest and you have really poor erector spinae or back muscles, and all of a sudden your posture changes. And then it's also just can be hard on your joints at first. So they do make weight vests where you can just incrementally keep adding weights in, and then you don't need to wear them all day long, but you can just wear them for a little bit throughout the day. But you do have to be conscious of your posture with weight vests.
Right. Thank you. Okay, there's a lot of bone density questions today. Jerry says, what are the best exercises to improve balance and build bone density? They won't necessarily be the same exercises, right?
Well, no, they can. I mean, I do a lot of different, not for the average person, but for as I working with clients and they become more athletic, I do lots of gentle leaping and jump rope exercises. So I have a whole entire video on using a jump rope, but the jump rope is cut in half, so everyone can do it. And jumping rope is probably one of the greatest things to build bone density, and at the same time developing coordination and skill and balance. But the problem with balance training, and I've been teaching balance classes in geriatrics for forever, is that when you have poor balance and you do balance training exercises, your risk of falling or getting hurt is high. So you do have to be careful. I can either use a gait belt with a client where I'm holding on to them, or I'll put them in front of a bed and I'll have a chair in front of them or a walker that they could hold on to if they need to. So you just have to be cautious. But if you could hold on to a wall, have a wall in front of you, and just stand on one leg and just lift your knee up and try to hold and then take your hand off, that's a great start to try to get to 15 seconds on your left and 15 on your right. And eventually maybe you'll be able to work up to 20 or 25 and 30. But again, I have a whole video on that.
Great, thank you. So here, where did that question go? From Do Right. Okay. Well, while I look for the question from Do Right, somebody says dehydrate hummus. Peggy says maybe you can talk about how to do that.
Oh, sure. Well, I just make my hummus like I normally would in the blender. So whether you're using canned beans or you make them in an Instant Pot, I'm just adding them into, let's say my blender, say you use 2 cans of washed garbanzo beans. So in case they had salt on them, you're putting in, if you use a fat like tahini, if not, you might use a potato or cannellini beans extra in there to thicken it. And then if you're not worried about the fat, you can add in traditional sesame tahini, a little bit of lemon, a little bit of garlic. And then if you choose other seasoning, that's fine. And then blend it all up. And then just take it out with a spatula and you just spread it on your dehydrating trays really thin as possible. And you heat it at usually about 115 to 120 degrees and just let it sit for 12 to 15 hours, maybe till it's basically crispy. It turns into crumbs and that's it. Just put it in a container. And then when you get to your location, like, so when I travel, it goes through TSA. So regular hummus won't go through TSA, but the powder does. Just get to your hotel. And if you have hot water available, then just do that and let it sit for 5 or 10 minutes. If you have cold water, it might take 20 or 30 minutes. And that's hummus right there. It's already made and good to go. And then I'll usually bring vegetables, with me already cut up, things like that.
It's a brilliant idea. Did you think of that yourself?
Yeah, well, I've been doing it forever, sure.
That's
I mean, I'm
amazing.
sure somebody else has done it.
No, I think it's brilliant. Do Right says consistency, knowing what to do and consistently doing the right thing when stressed and in social situations are completely different for me. Any insights on staying consistent?
Well, one of the most important things that I do with my private clients is we talk about integrity and we talk about values and we talk about why you're doing this. In other words, if you had a child that had allergies to nuts, you'd make it your business to know everything that was in your household. You'd make sure you knew every party they were going to and every air flight they were taking. You would go and do the work and do the research. And it's the same thing here. You just got to do the work and do the research. And you have to love yourself and care about yourself enough that you feel you're important enough to take care of. And that, again, that takes time because we're in a world that we don't, a lot of kids have trauma as childhood and it changes their brain chemistry. And they often lose touch with themselves and their brain gets rewired and they're not as normal as they could be. And the kids that I work with that have attention deficit, hyperactivity, they do no introspection at all. There's no self-care. There's no self-love. There's almost no sense of even self. So it just takes time and work. And that's why you need to work with a coach and or probably get an accountability partner. And that's why AJ and I created the Ultimate Weight Loss Program, because it's there as a program for you.
And that's why JP still does ongoing coaching. I don't. I do private consults, but generally just one to help direct people as to what will be beneficial. And most of them are in business now anyway, but JP will work with you ongoing and you get to text him. So he'd be a great coach for you if you don't want to join a large group. The other thing I would say to this question, JP, I always think about what my acting teacher, Joan Darling, used to say, and she's actually coming on the show in August, is how bad do you want it? And so she's mentioning, it sounds like, I don't know, it might not be a girl, sorry, but the person makes it sound like that they're going off track in certain times, when stressed or when in social situations. And usually when people go off track, at least the people we work with, it's junk food, it's vegan junk food. It's not so much that vegans are going off track and eating meat, right, JP? It's more like the junk, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel like that for many people, they have never made this concept of certain foods being a non-negotiable because they don't like the concept of abstinence. They feel it's, a lot of people say, oh, well, if I could never have a cookie again, I'd feel sad, or abstinence, there's too much deprivation. But when you think about it, people that are Orthodox Jews get stressed and they go in social situations, but they don't use that as an excuse to eat bacon and pork. People that are ethical vegans get stressed and go into social situations, but they don't use that as an excuse to eat animal products. But people that are food addicts use everything as an excuse to go back eating, sugar and flour. Because they don't claim it as a non-negotiable. It's something that they never really draw that line in the sand. It's just saying, I'm abstinent. I don't eat those things, because alcoholics get stressed too, and they go into social situations, but that doesn't give them license to drink alcohol.
Yeah, and when you have a calm, stable brain and you're more balanced, you don't need to basically medicate your feelings away. So people, when I work with people who are alcoholics or drug users, I'm never coming down on them for their addiction, and yet their family is, but their family's puffing on cigarettes and they're eating candy and cookies all day long. They have the same addiction as they do. These people who are hooked on drugs and alcohol are trying to get out of pain. The people eating the candy canes and the cotton candy are trying to get out of pain or change something up here. That's why I said nobody's going out at midnight to eat broccoli slaw, because it's not really doing much for your dopamine. It's not doing that much for you. So it's mainly processed foods that the vegan community is running to. They're not going to animal products.
Right, I agree. Jane says, what are the benefits of vibration plates for exercise?
Oh, well, it's fantastic for bone, for your bones and your muscles too, depending on how you use them. You can actually put your feet on them and go into a plank position or push-ups. You can actually just go down into a squat where you're bending down. So not only getting a vibration benefit, but then you're holding that squat and you're training your balance at the same time. It's a wonderful device. They're just expensive. The really good ones are expensive, but if you can get one, they're really good. You just don't, it's like anything else. It doesn't matter if you're doing yoga or running or jump roping or weightlifting. You don't want to just focus on one thing. You want a variety of them. I mean, one of the reasons that I'm trained in so many different systems and have these different certifications is because when I come to you driving a truck of basically systems. Where if a guy comes to your door and he says, I'm the, you know, the maintenance man, and he just has a hammer, well, it's like, well, he doesn't seem like he'd be very well versed if the only tool he has is a hammer. So you want to basically have a wide variety of systems you can do. And the problem is that the yogi community, not all of them, many, all they talk about is yoga. The Zumba people, all they talk about is Zumba. The cardio kickboxing people, all they do is cardio kickboxing. It's like if all you ate was tempeh and green leaf lettuce all day. Like there's more out there. So you want to get a variety of things so you don't get an overuse injury, and you train different systems. You just don't want to be doing somebody who power walks or runs all day. It's great for lower body bone density, but what if you slip and fall and you land and you break your ulnar radius because you didn't do any upper body training? So you just need to have a well-rounded approach.
Mm-hmm. Rachel says, do you recommend any supplements? And HHC says, I've read that vegans should supplement iodine as well as B12. Is that right or wrong?
Well, I've always suggested from day one we should be eating sea vegetables because vegans notoriously have a low iodine. And since we don't recommend iodized sea salt or iodized salt, it's not as easy to get iodine, 150 to 200 micrograms a day, depending if you're pregnant or not. But one of the main problems with iodine deficiency is mental retardation around the world. And not only that, but for health, for your thyroid. So sea vegetables are going to be our best source of iodine. Maybe pineapple grown by the sea also is good. So I don't recommend necessarily supplementing with a pill per se, but I recommend adding something like nori or little bits of kelp, or other, maybe any of the sea vegetables, but maybe hijiki, which can be higher in arsenic. But just be careful, like with kelp, it is super high in iodine. So read when it says, they usually will give you a little spoon in there, a tiny one, and it'll say 200 micrograms. That would be more than enough. You wouldn't just be putting it on like seasoning. But yeah, sea vegetables are excellent. And B12, of course, we should be taking the B12, for sure. I mean, that's kind of non-negotiable, the B12. It is this microorganism from the soil. So hundreds of years ago, we got it from our dirty hands and drinking well water and just eating a carrot out of the garden, but everything's sterile today. And we're using all these antibacterial cleaning agents. So everything's pretty sterile. So yeah, B12 supplement is pretty much normal across the boards for any of the vegan physicians would recommend it.
That is great. Okay. Oh, so Elise, if you're still watching, Talia says, I camp and hike frequently. If you want to purchase, I like Outdoor Herbivore. They have clean options. When I climbed Shasta, and dehydrated all my foods. And yes, there are some companies where you get dehydrated food, and that's also a good option.
Yeah, just one quick thing I want to mention is from it, we're talking more about health here, and those products are great. I've used all those different products. Anytime you can make things like the gel packs and things, the one thing you have more control of what's going in, you have generally a little bit better product. And not a lot of people think of this, but we don't have the waste. Many of those products, when you add hot water and then you eat it, when you're done, it's like a Mylar bag that gets thrown away. Unless you send it to a specific area, they don't get recycled. So it's like those gel packs, people bike and they just heave them on the street. They just throw them in the trails. So if you can make your own and use reusable things, it's like the hummus. You don't need to ever buy hummus in a plastic container. Just make your own hummus and put it in your own container. So if we'd all start thinking more about the environment and trying to make our own things, it's not only healthier, but it's better for the environment.
JP, I agree with you, but right now with COVID, we can't bring our own bags into the store. It's not allowed, at least where I live.
Yeah, I mean, what I do is I go to those stores and I put everything in my cart, and then I walk my cart out to my car, and then I load all that stuff in the back where I have my bags waiting. But I try to frequent farmers markets as much as possible. There's also an interesting company called Imperfect Produce, which delivers, and you have the option of picking produce that isn't wrapped in any bags at all, which is really nice too. And there's nothing wrong with the produce. Sometimes it has a little nick or so. But I think, what people are starting to see the toll the environment, what's happening to the environment. Because now with all this personal protection, these gloves and these masks, where does everyone think those are ending up? Those are going into landfills and eventually ending up into our waterways. And turtles will eat those and they'll choke. They show pictures of birds regurgitating for their babies, cigarette butts and plastic bottles, plastic bottle tops. So we just need to be more conscious. It can't just be a world of me, 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 me. We need to start thinking about we and what can we do to contribute to less plastic and less waste.
Okay, great. Thank you. Valeria and Sarah are asking, What kind of green powder do you recommend?
Okay, well, if you go to my site, livingwithharmony.org, and that's our sanctuary, animal sanctuary site, we don't sell anything there. It's just affiliate links. And you click on shop, you'll see the company there, Health Force. Now, one of the reasons I love Health Force is because everything's in glass. So they don't have plastic stuff, everything's in glass. And they make two really great ones. One is called Vita Mineral Green, and the other is called Greener Grasses. And they're extremely concentrated. And when I'm working with clients in UWL, Ultimate Weight Loss, they're craving sugar all the time, especially new people from a standard American diet to this. So I have them drink that throughout the day and swishing their palate, and it alkalizes their palate, and they have less sugar cravings. And then for people like when AJ was going traveling and there wasn't enough greens available, she would use the green powder. And so does Shada. Shada from the Ultimate Weight Loss too, she's done the same thing. And it's a great way to get concentrated greens in. Now, if you're eating a whole whole foods diet and it's all healthy and you're getting a lot of volume like AJ is, there's no real need to have green powders in. It's, because you're eating enough greens. But when you travel, it's there. And if you want to alkalize your palate, it's there.
Great, thank you. Florence says, do we have access to JP's earlier Zoom sessions?
Yeah, well, when AJ puts the links up, those are in the cloud, so you can sign up for those anytime you want. So those are always available. There's two series. One was on the pandemic, and it was on compassion. It was on preparing for emergencies. It was on introspection and inner work. So each week there was a new program, learning to communicate, having gratitude, how to prepare food with love and care. And then the newest one is just all sorts of different successful people and techniques that we talk about how to stay on the path.
Great. Annette says, it's awesome how JP stands for the whole show. I can't do that, unfortunately, because I have too many things to run.
Well, you do this all day too.
Exactly. All right. So we have a question from Kathy. What is the recommended amount, according to the plant-based doctors, of ground flax seeds to eat for omega-3s?
Well, that's interesting because, as you know, the plant-based doctors, like most doctors, don't agree on everything, right? We have two of the most prominent plant-based diet doctors on the planet who have written the most books and done the most specials that completely disagree. And it also, most of them will agree with ground flaxseed, but whether you need to take an omega-3 supplement or not, they disagree on. But to answer your question, one, when you buy flaxseed, do two things. Once, buy the brown, and then a month or two later, buy the golden. And two, when you buy it whole, then grind it in the blender or a coffee grounder, and then just put it in your freezer. Or you can grind it each time you use it. I don't think that's convenient. Would that be best? Yeah, that'd probably be best, but storing in the freezer is fine. With flaxseed, if you're not used to it, you want to start with a 1/4 teaspoon and work your way up. Remember, there's 3 teaspoons in a tablespoon. So generally, 1 to 2 tablespoons is what most people are recommending. But a lot has to do with how well you convert some of these shorter chain fatty acids to the longer chain, like EPA and DHA. Not everyone converts that well. And if you've had diabetes or certain problems like that, so you should talk to your plant-based physician about that. But also remember, just eating a lot of dark green leafy vegetables and even weeds like purslane, which is one of the highest, best sources for us. And if you can eat walnuts, those are great sources too. But here's the secret. When you look at like AJ, her levels are extremely high, and you're not really pounding flaxseed and walnuts, right?
I haven't eaten any flaxseed, walnuts, chia seeds, except for a thickener and a dressing for 8.5 years. But I'm willing to eat pounds of green vegetables every day. Not everybody's willing to do that.
Well, and what you're doing that no one else is doing is your omega-6 is so low. And it's the battle between omega-6 and 3 that caused the problem, because people who eat a lot of processed foods or animal foods, they're so high in omega-6 and they're not getting any omega-3. So that's how we get all this inflammation. But AJ, you're eating basically all greens. You're not eating much omega-6s in your diet at all. So it's one of the reasons your levels are so high. Now, that doesn't mean that flaxseed or walnuts people shouldn't have. If you can handle it, AJ and I've always said, eat the least restrictive program you can. So if you can have nuts and seeds and you don't have an issue with a little bit, then it's not a problem. But yeah, so I do think flax seeds are great. And what I do is, again, I just grind them up and put them in the freezer. And then if I have some oatmeal or if I have a smoothie, I put it in there. But start with a 1/4 teaspoon because, my background's in the geriatric community. And I learned a long time ago that flaxseed is a very moving experience for seniors. So you don't want to be eating a whole spoon or two of it right off the bat because it's a little bit harder to be in the bathroom a bit.
Yeah. When you hear most of the doctors, what I seem to hear is a tablespoon is about right for most people. Ground that's about what they should aim for. Maybe some people more, maybe some people less. And Gita says, do you have to cook purslane? You can. I find when I teach at Rancho La Puerta in Mexico, they cook it and I don't care for it cooked. It's slimy. I just prefer it raw in salads, but you can cook it. It's just it's a weed actually. And there was a question that what I see moves more quickly than what other people see because I'm looking at 5 different platforms, whereas they're looking at only one that they're on. If somebody had something wrong with their patella, could they do the vibrational plates?
That'd be something you best check with your orthopedic surgeon or your orthopedic doctor, but you could sit on it, and you can also, people put their hands on it also, so it vibrates. Depending on how stable that person's knee is, that would be something to ask a physician.
Right. And back to the flax question, I don't think people realize that you can get your omega-3 fatty acid levels checked. And if your doctor won't order it, you can do it yourself now. There's blood tests where you can do a finger stick. So you can find out where you are and then determine what you need to supplement if you do. And so that's
also just to remind you that in our vegan community, we have wonderful, amazing vegan physicians and dietitians and everyone, but not everybody agrees. So some people will recommend omega-3 supplements and other physicians won't. So it may get confusing, but most everybody, unless they have heart disease or diabetes, or trying to deal with that, is most everybody is going to generally say some flaxseed or some walnuts in moderation is okay.
Absolutely. Victoria says, can I get my iodine from drinking vitamin mineral green?
You can get some because they do put sea vegetables in there. Whether it's the amount you need, 150 to 200 micrograms, you might need a little bit more. What I like to recommend is get some sheets of nori. They just look like a piece of paper. And when you make your salad, and like for me, I put hummus as a dressing. And so then I just put my salad, mix it with hummus and it sticks. And then I just put that on the nori and I roll it up and then I eat it that way. And the other thing I just tear them into strips and then I put it in my soup. And then once it hits the hot water, it turns into a noodle consistency. You can do that. And if you wanted to use a tiny bit of kelp powder, you can put that in food too. But I don't know if vitamin mineral green lists I don't know if they list the iodine content, but I don't think it would be enough just the vitamin mineral green.
Great. And Annette says, what about Amla powder?
Oh, well, Amla is an amazing powder. If you can handle it, it sure tastes really sour, bitter flavor, but yeah, it's a wonderful thing for blood sugar, and it's one of the highest antioxidants you can get. And Dr. Greger's been recommending it a long time. I've recommended it forever. Indian gooseberry, they also call it. So I think it's a great addition. How you take it, if you can get the veggie caps or tablets, that's the easiest. But if the cheapest is buying the powder, it's a little bit hard to swallow though, because it doesn't taste really good unless you can deal with really kind of, I don't know how you describe it, sour or bitter, but I don't think it tastes great, but it sure is good for you.
Yeah. Somebody's asking, do I stand the whole time I spin? I do, because when I broke my knee in 2010, I chose not to have surgery. That's what was my impetus to finally lose weight. And my orthopedic doctor said I can cycle, but I can't go up and down. So he said, you either sit for the whole class or stand for the whole class. And I just feel I get a better workout standing. But
it's amazing you can do that, because some people, it's hard on their feet as they get older. They sometimes lose some of the fat pads, but you've done it for a long time and probably build up some good bone density there.
Yeah. And ever since I heard the Chores talk about how, of course, I wish I was fitter on the upper part of my body, but they said, at least for Alzheimer's prevention, you want those leg muscles. That's what they said, those big leg muscles. So that's what I have. My lower half is quite large.
Well, all you have to do though, AJ, is like we did at your house, is just, sneak some movement in throughout the day. Remember how we had the bands on the refrigerator door and a set of weights by the couch? You just kind of sneak some stuff in. You don't have to devote hours a day to this stuff. Remember, primitive people never exercise a day in their life, but they're working in the fields and doing manual work all day long.
JP, do you know Danny Taylor and Giacomo Marchese?
Oh, sure. Wonderful people.
They were both guests this week, and I'm like, whoa. I mean, their muscles, that's amazing how many hours it must take to look like that. They're beautiful, sculpted muscles. Yeah, incredible. Karen says, I'm allergic to seafood. So is there a cross reaction for nori, I guess, or other sea vegetables?
That's a good question. I'm not really sure, because if you have an iodine sensitivity, then it could be. So it's something to ask your doctor.
Absolutely. Okay, here's a question from Chris. How do you know when a butternut squash or a kabocha squash is a good pick? I know how to pick out a melon, but squashes remain a mystery. I thought squashes were melons. There have been times the kabocha has been flavorless and I'm left disappointed. Do you have any tips on purchasing a good one and how to make them last as long as possible so I can enjoy them year round? My parents bring me several from their garden before heading south for the winter, but that isn't enough for me. I could eat them every day. So we have a store here and we had it in LA called Gelson's, and it's a higher end store, sort of like a, what's it called? What's that really fancy other store? I can't think of the name. It's another fancy, very kind of high end store, and their produce people are always right. That's what I would do is go to not the 99-cent store, which you can get kabocha squash there, and really ask. I don't know how they do it, but the produce people, and in Gelson's, they will even cut the produce for you and to make sure it's good before you buy it. At least that's how it was in LA. So I don't have any secrets for the squashes.
Just keep eating them. They're really good for you.
But she doesn't want to be disappointed and get one that's bad. Sometimes you get a bad sweet potato too. It just happens, But I would definitely go, what is the name, guys? What's the name of that really fancy store? I want to say it's not Barnes and Noble. It's, what is that fancy schmancy store? But Bristol Farms. Thank you. Nadej. Bristol Farms, that's it. Because go to the produce manager. These guys know stuff. Let me tell you, they are amazing. Okay. Thank you very much. All right. Haunted Mansion says, I'm struggling with veggies for breakfast, many years of nothing at all, or just 1 cup of black coffee with unsweetened oat milk, and the change is killing me. Okay, is it literally killing you? Because JP, you always talk about language being important. Is it literally killing you? I'm nauseous for hours after eating. I'm up at 5:30, and once I get to work at 6:30, there's no time for food until lunch. Any ideas? Is soup something I can do? See, I think if somebody's getting nauseous, they're eating when they're not hungry. That's my first guess, but what do you think?
Well, also, yeah, soup was great. And I always recommend people have the brother to a smoothie, which is a blended soup. And this way you can get large volumes of vegetable in, maybe even a bit of some berries in there or anything else you want. And then you can just eat it like a hot soup. And that's a great way to do it.
Yeah, and we've recommended this a lot in the Ultimate Weight Loss Program, especially to the people that are like teachers, where they maybe not they might get hungry before their actual lunch hour, or anybody with a job. Now, obviously, like if you're in the operating room and it's a sterile environment, you can't do this, but most people that have jobs are allowed to have a water bottle. And so instead of getting a clear one, you get something called a clean canteen. You make sure you get the one that's specific for hot or you'll burn your hand. You get one for cold. I have a purple one, I actually have 2. And you can do your blended soups. You can even do a starchy blended soup so that if you get hungry before your break, you can sip it. Nobody is going to know that it's what it is. And even if you're a cashier or whatever, that's something you can do. I mean, and the thing is, when people said, oh, well, my job won't allow it, get a letter from your doctor. Dr. Goldham will write that letter that you have to have that. I think it's just so sad that people in our society, obviously if they're in an operating room, I understand, or an astronaut maybe, but that people should be allowed to eat when they're hungry and go to the bathroom when they need to go to the bathroom. You know what I mean? Instead of that.
I use the Hydro Flask. So you can get some of these like double insulated, so they keep whatever you put in there cold. I once put some warm beverage in it, then put it in the freezer and took it out a couple hours later, and it was still boiling hot inside. The other thing you can do is, let's say for instance, somebody just won't eat vegetables for breakfast. Let's say they're going to eat oatmeal. Well, you can wake up and have a little bit of water with a little bit of green powder to alkalize that palate, and then get a little bit of green, antioxidants in, then eat your oatmeal. But you want to start training your palate. The problem is, like, as much as I think oatmeal has some merits, I think where we run into a problem is when people have oatmeal and then they put 2 pounds of dried dates and raisins and bananas and all these things, and it
walnuts and peanut butter and
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so they're basically having dessert for breakfast.
Exactly, some sort of cookie, because that's how you make muffins and cookies, is like that.
And I don't have a problem with oats, but I like people to eat the whole oat, the oat groat, not the rolled, not the instant, not the steel cut. And there's some great reasons for that in Mastering Diabetes, especially if somebody has a poor insulin sensitivity, to eat the whole oat and not the rolled. And I did a whole video on that. So that's terrific. There's a question from Jennifer. What are your thoughts on the rebounder for osteoporosis?
Well, I mean, the rebounder is probably one of the best movements in the world for your lymphatic system and your balance. It's amazing. And if you know how to use it, there's a lot of amazing strength training and agility drills. And of course, again, it's this hierarchy. Anything is going to build bone density, basically, you know, standing and anything above standing. So jumping up and down, just remember jumping up and down on a surface that gives, where there's not much impact compared to jumping up and down on the grass or a pad. It's a hierarchy of good, better, best. So I think rebounders are great, but I just think that as maybe you get used to rebounding, if you're able then gently to do some easy movements on a pad or the grass or something asphalt, where you can actually be landing up and down a little bit to stimulate the bones and the muscle more, that's even better as time goes on. But always check with your physician to make sure that they're okaying that. But rebounding is probably one of the greatest things in the world you can do.
Great, thank you. So Jean says, I have IBS and greens are a trigger. How do I replace those nutrients? Well, as luck would have it, I happen to be hosting an upcoming summit in the fall called the GI Health Summit. And I've interviewed probably 20 GI doctors. And their recommendation is you will work with one of them, because almost all of them do consults, or their registered dietitian, to find out a way to get these very, very healthy foods that you can need to work for you. And as like JP said, there's different ways to have it. Maybe you can't eat raw kale, maybe you can't eat steamed kale, but maybe you can eat it blended. It's just sort of like people that are on blood thinners say, well, I can't eat greens because I'm on blood thinners. No, you work with a doctor to change your medication so that you can't eat greens. And so you work with a professional. I have IBS too, and there has to be some greens that will work for you. Maybe it's not kale, but maybe it's one of the baby greens are very mild. Maybe you can do baby spinach. Maybe you can do frozen spinach, but there's got to be a way that you can, because greens are really the one food that everybody, even people that eat diets that we don't recommend, agree on. They are the nutritional powerhouses, the most preventative for Alzheimer's, for cardiovascular health. So you have to find a way you can eat them. And if they are, when you say a trigger for your IBS, then there's got to be either a different green that you can try or a different way of cooking it, or really deal with your IBS so that you can eat these foods. Maybe you have SIBO and you haven't been tested and you don't know it. But what I'm learning from this GI Health Summit is that there's always ways to eat these foods, but sometimes an elimination diet at the beginning or a low FODMAP diet at the beginning, which you can't stay on because you can get nutrient deficiencies. But apparently there are all these people that I'm meeting that are registered dietitians specifically for IBS that can help you. What would you say, John?
Yeah. And one of the things that not enough people are talking about when you deal with IBS or any gut issues is the vagus nerve. And I think people have to understand that stress and IBS and intestinal issues go hand in hand. So it's very important to be able to regulate your breathing and not being an upper chest breather, where you're activating, your sympathetic nervous system, where you're doing slow belly breathing. That's the parasympathetic system, which slows things down, activates the vagus nerve, relaxes you, less stress to the gut. So that's one of the things. The other thing, of course, you can always do is you can always juice, and you can use that juice to not only drink, but you can make a soup out of it and gently warm it. And then you can, when you find some other vegetables that you can handle in the whole form, like AJ was saying, some of the baby spinach and things, you start out small amounts of those in the soup, and then you find out, hey, I don't have a reaction. So the next day you put a little bit more. It's like beans. You find the tolerance level where you can tolerate. When I have people that tell me they can't eat beans, I'll say, well, how much beans do you eat? Well, 2 cups. I say, could you eat 2 beans? And they're like, well, what do you mean? I said, can you eat 2 beans? They go and eat 2 beans. They don't have a problem. I said, well, guess what you're going to do tomorrow? 3. So you're going to eat until you find that amount of beans that aggravates you, and then back off.
Right. Talia says 100% JP, how you eat is just as important as what. And that's one of the things Dr. Clapper said in the summit, chew your food to a cream. That's why your idea of juicing it, if she juices kale, she'll get the nutrients without the fiber, which in her case might be beneficial. So that is great. It's amazing. You could be an expert in this summit, because what you said is exactly what they said about the breathing thing. They actually, one of the experts actually taught a breathing exercise for this to calm the people down. So that's you're pretty
We
smart.
go over it. I think it's the first Zoom series I did on the pandemic where we talk about breath. and we talk about how important it is to be in a relaxed state, especially during the pandemic and this COVID, that everyone's all jacked up and tight everywhere they go, especially their digestive system. So being in a relaxed state is very important.
Right.
And we did a whole class on mindful cooking and mindful eating that was really important.
Sounds fabulous. And I'll be sure to give all you guys the links in the show notes. So Kathy wants to know, JP, where you got your t-shirt.
Well, this is Beet Boost. So this is a product that I use. And as you know, I always recommend this. And AJ, you know, you make some interesting things. You can make popsicles out of them and sorbet and things. And so it's beetboost.com. And if you do order the Beet Boost, use the code JP16. You get free shipping and then I think 15% off. And it's a product where every spoon is 4 beets and 40 tart cherries. And people always say, well, wouldn't it be better to eat beets and eat cherries? Absolutely. If you can eat that amount, then it's fine. But the main reason I'm encouraging it is because 40 tart cherries is very powerful as an anti-inflammatory. So I'm working with a lot of people that have a lot of inflammation, and you work with people who have heart disease, they have constricted arteries, they have the occlusions, and this nitric oxide from the beets that gets created from the beets helps vasodilate it, open it. It's like a Viagra nitroglycerin. So I'm still in favor of using green powders and Beet Boost and things like that. I don't believe that we should just only be eating whole foods, plant-based diet for everybody. I mean, we all should, but when I meet people that won't do it, then I have to have alternatives to them. So I have some people that won't stop eating hamburgers, and I say, could you put 1 piece of lettuce on your burger? And they say, okay. And eventually that builds into a bunch of lettuce. And they say, now could you eat a salad with your burger? And then eventually months and months in, they're eating a veggie burger and a salad. So it's a hierarchy of good. If we could all just eat whole food, plant-based, it'd be great. We probably wouldn't need all powders and things. But if somebody gets run over by a Mack truck, nobody wants celery and carrots and coleslaw when you need morphine. So you can't throw everything out.
Right. And Cindy says, beet popsicles, holy cow. Yeah, I did a Weight Loss Wednesday. If you go to my YouTube page, I call them beetsicles, and they're quite delicious. Okay, so there's a couple of comments on Dr. Clapper not liking the rebounder. Let me see if I can find that. Boy, let's see. I you know, you guys, this goes so fast. Somebody's saying if you have pelvic floor issues, you shouldn't use the rebounder.
Well, pelvic floor issues, that's like saying, yeah, that's like if we recommend blueberries and you're allergic to blueberries. If you have pelvic floor issues, then any jumping, bouncing, things like that can cause problems. And, you know, people have sensitive bladders. They can be, you know, having to go to urinate all the time. So for specific things, I'm just giving general. So.
Right. Yeah, here Jessica says Dr. Clapper doesn't like the rebounder as it stresses the ligaments of the bladder and uterus, which may cause worsen bladder leakage. And I'm having 2 pelvic floor therapists on the GI Health Summit to talk about these kind of issues because they sometimes affect GI health, pelvic floor issues. All right. So last question. I know JP has to train somebody, and this is from Maureen. How long did it take for Chef AJ to be able to eat fruit and or sophist-free desserts without having the urge to binge on them? Well, so I never didn't eat fruit. So I don't know why you think that I ever had a problem with fruit or would binge on it. I think fruit is a little easier to overeat because it's so delicious than, say, vegetables, which, you know, you eat a certain amount and you're done. Especially during watermelon season, I've eaten whole watermelon, not in one sitting in one day, but fruit is also mostly water, so I don't worry about it. So, you know, when you think about watermelon, you know, fruit is about 300 calories a pound. Watermelon's about 140. It's more the caloric density of vegetables because it's just water. So I've never had an urge to binge on fruit ever, and I've never had an urge to binge on sophist-free dessert, because I never have them except for very, very rarely when I have to do some kind of video, and then I get it out of the house as soon as possible. Not because I binge on it, because I just don't want to be eating desserts all the time, because if I am, then I'm not eating what I need to be eating. So what are your thoughts, JP? Do you think people that have problems with certain foods could eventually introduce them without having the urge to binge?
Oh, yeah, sure. I've had lots of people that eventually, because to me, as I've said from day one, a lot of this has to do with your self-esteem and self-love and how much you care about yourself. So I think it's not just about food addiction. You know, you or I could go in, we have not eaten for weeks, and we can go into a slaughterhouse and we're not hungry at all. We're not going to eat that for nothing because that's not part of our value system. And just like you know, you might feed your dog or your cat something, but you don't eat that food because that's not your food. So when people start realizing whole foods, fresh fruits and vegetables and things like that, that's our food and that's all we're going to eat. That's the other food is not for us. It's not our food.
Absolutely. And the thing is, I've never binged on a whole natural food. I had bulimia, but I never binged on fruit or potatoes or rice or beans or even vegan, a whole food vegan dessert that I could make now. It was always on processed food, sugar, flour, oil. So I think a lot of times people use the word binge not in the way of actual bulimia, but maybe in a way that they feel like they're just overeating on calories, but it's really not binging in the true sense of the word. And I think sometimes when you don't allow yourself things that are healthy and whole natural, you will have the urge to overeat on them because then you feel like, well, I never have these, so I have them now, I better eat the whole cake kind of mentality,
Yeah, I wish the kids that I work with could binge on more fruits and vegetables. That'd be wonderful. I'd be thrilled if they did that. But it's a game of making smoothies and popsicles and ways to sneak it in their diet. So don't restrict the fruits and vegetables unless you
absolutely. And the thing is the important thing is to know thyself. I always said that food addiction exists on a continuum. Some people are more or less vulnerable, and depending on what's going on in their life, might be more or less vulnerable. So you just have to know yourself. If you can't have my vegan carrot cake in your house without eating the whole thing, that might not be something for you. That said, if somebody else makes it on your birthday and gives you a piece and it's not going to send you into a destructive eating pattern that's going to make you just want to eat that all the time, people are different. And I think the longer you're in recovery, the easier it is maybe to eat some of these foods occasionally. The thing is I don't want them because then I can't eat my food that is what I really need to sustain myself and have the calm brain, because then when I have the carrot cake in the house, I don't think about my salads and my sweet potatoes. All I think about is the carrot cake. So for me, the best amount is none, but everybody's going to be different. And too many people say, oh, it's just too hard to not have treats, but I think that when you get recovery from food addiction and to your body's ideal weight, that's the treat. And you're less likely to be so interested in these foods for entertainment and dopamine.
Well, and also when I work with clients that will say, well, I don't really feel that fruit is a treat. Then I say, well, let's water fast you for 5 days and let's see how that apple tastes and that orange taste after 5 days. And I guarantee you'll think it's a treat. It's just that you've been tricking your brain by eating all these hyper palatable foods. So there's no way an apple is going to satisfy you if you're used to this high caloric, high sugar, high fat snack that you've been eating. So it's not
that is so true. Okay, I said last question, but quickly, Callie wants to know, JP, what are your thoughts on cellulite?
Cellulite?
Cellulite.
Oh, well, I mean, I think that there's just too much nonsense going on with potions and creams and wraps and things like this. I think that it's a normal part of life, and I think a lot of it's genetic. There's certain people that have more predisposition to it. It's like varicose veins. And so you learn to live with it. Unfortunately, you're not seeing the celebrities being photoshopped. And if you were to see what the celebrities look like in real life, you'd be shocked and surprised. But when they get photoshopped and their bodies look no cellulite and perfect, it's very disheartening to normal people that have cellulite, and they just think that they're alone. It's not that way. It's a natural part of life. So
I will say though, I had 2 pockets of it on my outer thighs 8 years ago. And the longer I stay with this way of eating without eating the overt fats, it's pretty much gone. So I think people need to stick with it longer.
Yeah, you have to lose the weight. Yeah.
Yeah,
for sure. And there's no doubt about that.
Well, this has been great, JP. Anything you want to say just to end it, or what you're up to? I mean,
just to kind of remember that, this whole thing it's great that we're taking care of ourselves, but let's make sure that we take care of one another and we're kind to everyone and kind to all beings. So all expressions of life deserve love, and that includes our planet. And I think it's really important that the choices we make every day, they're a reflection to Mother Earth. So do your very best to avoid single-use plastic and plastic bags. Try to reuse stuff as much as possible. There's no reason we need to always go about new clothes. We can go to thrift stores and buy jackets and pants and things like that, so we don't have to keep adding to the landfill. Thousands and thousands and thousands of tons of these things get thrown out, and the plastic just ends up in the waterway. And then animals eat it and they choke and they die. And then when you eat things from the ocean, even seaweeds and sea vegetables, they have microplastic in them. So take care of yourself, but also take care of other creatures in the planet.
Right. And Bailey would like to add, please adopt, don't shop, don't breed and buy while homeless animals die. Thanks, JP. I really enjoy doing these with you. It seems much more interesting than when I just have to answer them alone to sort of have a conversation. So I'd love to have you back every month if you're available.
Okay, thank you. Thanks everybody for being here. And the links will be, AJ, I know you're going to post the links. And if you post my email too, in case somebody wants to work with me one-on-one, they can email me.
I absolutely will. Thanks, JP. And thanks everybody for watching. Please come back at 11 a.m. tomorrow when Sanai Suzuki is going to tell her incredible story of recovery from cancer using whole plant foods. And she is going to make vegan dog biscuits. Take care. Thanks again, JP.
Bye.